Thank you very much, everybody, and welcome to our final session for the day. My name's Michelle Andrews. I'm a member of the VicTESOL committee and I also teach at Blackburn English Language School, and I'll be chairing the panel today. Research shows us that one of the most effective ways to assist with the settlement of students and to assist with their language learning is to develop a relationship or partnership with that student's community. Educational organisations, schools, and in particular teachers are in a unique position to be able to do this due to the direct contact they have with families. The state government has developed a framework for improving student outcomes, the VicTESOL, and Improvement Initiative number 6 states that schools will strengthen their capacity to build relationships with the broader community by partnering with community sectors and providers, make strategic use of existing community resources and capabilities, and increase the services delivered inside the school gate. Schools will realise the value of harnessing the full capacity of the community and parents to collectively encourage students' learning and enhance student outcomes. So how do we do this? What models of engagement are there already and what can we learn from them? And how do we work in our own context to achieve this? Today's forum will provide some insights into projects in EAL contexts that have contributed to successfully building relationships with communities. Our aim for this forum is to present information that will provide an impetus for teachers to actively seek out ways to implement partnership projects in their own settings. I'll briefly introduce the panel and they'll be able to tell us a bit more about what they do and themselves in a few moments, and they'll also tell us later about some of their successes and identify some of the issues that they faced in their projects, how to avoid them, and perhaps some tips or strategies for you to use. So on the panel today, we have Jen Clark, who is manager of the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre Schools Program, Anthony Bruegere, EAL teacher at Wodonga Senior Secondary College, Mairead Hannon, Head of Education and Careers at The Huddle, David Ogden, who's the Wellbeing Team Leader from Dandenong High School, and finally, Education Consultant Howard Kelly. So welcome to all of you, and we look forward to hearing what you have to tell us. So I guess if we begin, I'll just ask each of you to give us a brief introduction to your organisation and identify your community and what you're doing to engage with them. So Jen, if you'd like to start.
Okay. It's an interesting experience for me to be here, given that I'm not actually working within your immediate community. The work that I do through the schools program at the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre is about engaging with students and school communities to understand and have some compassion and empathy, I guess, for many of the students with whom you work. The ASRC was started about 15 years ago by our current CEO, Con Panel-Georgidis, and when one asks or wonders how an individual can make a difference, I think certainly working in the sector in which I work, we often think, oh my God, this is so big. It's impossible to make a difference. But Con started the ASRC on his own. He started as one person who saw a need, and he was lecturing in social work at the time, and he said to his students, go out into the community. He was at Vic Uni in Footscray. Go out into the community, have a look around, see what the needs are. They came back and they said there's food security is a really big issue for people seeking asylum in our community. So people seeking asylum isn't anything new, obviously, in and around Melbourne. But and so they came back with that piece of information for Con, and Con, one person, went out, set up a little food bank. That was, as I said, 15 years ago. Now it's an organisation with more than 30 programs. We've got nearly 3,000 clients, 80 plus staff, 1,200 volunteers. So never ever, and it's one of the things that I always say to the groups that I speak to, never ever, ever underestimate your capacity to make a difference as an individual. And I think that's mean, anyone who is working in any capacity as a teacher understands their capacity to make a difference as an individual. We don't always know what that difference is, but we know that we have that capacity to make a difference. But Con is just another example of the sort of difference that people can make. I think I've got myself sidetracked. But in terms of the schools program, essentially what I do is I spend a lot of time out in schools or working with school groups and school communities and sharing information, I guess, and stories and knowledge about those people who are seeking asylum here in Australia. So despite our best efforts, and in spite of the efforts of perhaps other groups in the community, there's still a lot of misinformation out there. And so the role of the schools program is to get out there and engage and work with schools to foster greater knowledge and understanding of people seeking asylum in Australia.
Great, thank you, Jen. Anthony.
Hello, Anthony from Wodonga Senior Secondary College, just on the Hume Highway, about 3 hours away from here. So I'm an English teacher, English second language teacher, literature teacher, etc. at Wodonga Senior Secondary with years 10, 11 and 12 students at my school. And we have a very diverse community at our in Wodonga there, from English second language speakers from a number of different backgrounds, such as Australian-born Chinese or migrants from the Philippines and China and Vietnam, or also our humanitarian visa settlement families as well, so from Ghana, also Uganda, Kenya, the Congo and Nepal as well. And we also have a homestay program for full fee paying students from China and Vietnam to acquire English and gain an Australian education certificate and so on there, which allows us to fund some special programs too. So, yeah, if you can keep clicking through there, Michelle. With that background there, you can flick over to the next slide there, I suppose. There's a bit of a snapshot there of the school support that we offer at our college. And I'm very fortunate, my principal team are very passionate about English as additional language inclusion in the community and for support too. So I know that's some challenges in some schools, and if you've got your administration team on board, it's a real power for you to be able to go to them and offer particular programs. So if you go to the next slide, thanks. Yeah. Michelle, there's some social inclusion activities. These are just a couple that we are able to complete in Wodonga, and a real benefit is forming partnerships with local businesses and organisations. Food is a real win, not only for staff being on board, but for other students getting together and trying different food that they would not have eaten at home themselves, and for our English second language students and families to prepare their cultural food to show pride in their culture, all in turn looking to promote a sense of belonging in our community, confidence within the students there, and also learning languages through contexts such as excursions or food, multicultural days, partnerships with sporting groups and outdoor education groups, providing opportunities to fundraise for some of our charity groups that we're organised with too. And there's some getting your local media engaged. I suppose it's a bit easier in regional places maybe than Melbourne. I'm sorry if I'm speaking out of turn, but with our Border Mail and Prime 7 News in Albury Wodonga, they are always seeking out school events and so on to publicise to the community. So you can thanks Michelle, just keep flicking through some of our news reports there of some activities and programs that we've offered. Thanks again. This is a recent one. Netball Victoria have approached our school after hearing about our students within our community, especially for girls of refugee background, to learn skills in netball and be involved in netball groups. There to all that wonderful social inclusion and belonging that is gained from sporting clubs there, which is very difficult, we've found, for girls in our community, because the boys come with basketball and soccer skills that are highly appreciated by local groups there, and with some work with very fortunate Richmond Football Club, getting on board with us as well, and some of our snow program too. That some organisations have. They have I suppose, an allowance for getting local community groups and marginalised groups, I suppose, involved. And we're very fortunate we have our students as guests of Falls Creek for a day every winter, and they provide the gear and everything free of charge with the partnership we've offered there. Yeah, and there's some tips and strategies I've found there too. But thank you very much.
Yeah, great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Mairead.
Hi, so I work at The Huddle, which is the charity attached to the North Melbourne Football Club, and we have a community classroom down the road here at Arden Street that where we work with young people aged 15 to 25. So the brief for The Huddle was to promote or enhance social cohesion. So we're funded by the Australian Multicultural Foundation and the Scanlon Foundation and various other government groups. And I guess the way most of the participants, the young people that come along, are from EAL backgrounds. So when I say most, it'd be, between 95 and 100% of the kids who choose to come along to The Huddle are from those backgrounds. But the volunteer base that supports them is certainly highly diverse. And you can see great social cohesion connections happening in the classroom, that space, because of that interaction and that negotiation between different sorts of people. So the programs that are run are not just sport. In fact, quite the opposite, given there's a classroom. I guess we use football as a hook to bring community together, and the great advantage of that, I guess, is the reach of AFL. So we have somewhere between 10 and 20,000 young people learn football through The Huddle in North Melbourne area and in Tasmania and in Wyndham. And then the ones who live close to around this area in North Melbourne access The Huddle. The great thing that we see there is, instead of it being school-based interaction, where kids from a particular school do a whole lot of things together, is that you've got kids from 50 different schools coming together at that space because they want to be there to study, to do sport and recreation, to participate in sport and recreation, to do leadership programs, to begin to have a voice for their community. So it's a space where we're trying to listen to them and develop them as much to lead the space and the activities that will continue to make The Huddle interesting and successful.
Great. Thank you. David.
Very good. Can I just tell you that this is really scary down here? and I might forget words, so please excuse me if I forget words, and I'll try and think of them as I'm going along, and then I might interrupt people just to tell you what the word was that I forgot. I'm the wellbeing team leader at Dandenong High School, and I don't know how many people are from the metro area and know Dandenong as an area or the school. But the school is a pretty large one in a pretty diverse area. We have capacity for 2,100 students on a single campus, and we have approximately 1,900 at the current time. It's broken up into a house system, and the houses are physical buildings. So there's a leadership team with about 300 students. So students are quite well known within the school, even though it's a big school. We have, and it changes all the time because sometimes particular groups are only represented by 1 or 2 students, but there's somewhere between 70 and 80 different nationalities and languages that are represented at the school. So you can see it is pretty diverse. 25% of the students come from a refugee-like background. They're not necessarily refugees right now, but they've come from that background, so it's a lot of students in that position. We have about 75 students who are refugees or asylum seekers who are independent, so they have no parents with them. They're here by themselves, and they either live in residential care or they band together in groups and pool money and do all kinds of stuff like that. We do lots of things at the school in terms of connecting with the community, and we've just done an exercise in trying to map some of that, and I've got about 3 A4 pages of things that are just written down of organisations that we're connected with. But one of the reasons we're here, and Howard's with me, we're here together. We're not together, but we're here together. is that in our school review, the reviewer talked about us not making the most of what he called our cultural collateral or capital. And so what we've done is we've created a working party that's looking at how we take the school and not bring the community in, but move into the community itself, and how we connect with people in the community. And so far, all we've managed to do is create the group almost, and come up with a kind of purpose or definition. So I might stop there, and Howard might introduce himself, and I'll turn this off. I can stop shaking.
Right. I'm glad you clarified the nature of our relationship. I'm eternally grateful. I've been around education for a long while. Some of you may have bumped into me in other circumstances. I was a principal. I was in charge of the VCE for 8 years for the state, and then a bureaucrat. And then I supposedly left education in 2003 to retire, but that doesn't seem to have worked out particularly well. But can I say to you that I've been involved in lots of places, including, I might add, Anthony, in helping to create your school a long while ago, Wodonga Senior Secondary College. But for me, this project, working with Dandenong High, there is an absolute, for me, sheer joy of actually standing in the yard at Dandenong High. And there's a whole, and I don't want to be terribly inappropriate, but there's so many people who are part of our elected members of Parliament, let alone a potential Republican President of the United States, I wouldn't mind being able to take and put in that yard, because for me there is such a delight in watching the globe go by and to actually see the respect and the integrity and the bond between the school and its students, and between the students themselves with their multiplicity of backgrounds. Having said that, what we're trying to do, as David said, is to try to change the way that we approach things. And as David mentioned, we're trying to move outside of what one normally would do. I remember in the 1980s and 90s when I was principal in Northcote at Northcote Tech, which became Thornbury High, a principal of both of them. And I remember at that stage, we thought that handling multicultural diverse issues was translating every single thing we could have into multiple languages. And I remember all this money that we spent on translating all these incredible documents on school councils and having them in every language imaginable. And apart from underwriting and underpinning the printing organisations of the area, I don't know that it did a hell of a lot. What we are going to try to do is to actually have a go at working specifically with the following communities at this stage in Dandenong: the Afghani community, the Sri Lankan community, the Islander community, and the Albanian community. Specifically decided after a lot of discussion inside the school at working with those particular communities, not to put some template onto those communities and say this is how we are going to do things, but rather to engage with those communities and their various groups to ask how we can make the school a reference point for them, how we can empower their young people, how we can help them understand the education process in this country. And that will involve us in doing such things as, obviously, working with people from the local mosques. And in the Islander community, it will mean actually getting inside some evangelical churches. So what we're trying to do, and we are really, this is very early days, we're scoping it, but we have had good feedback from people who want the school to be more than just the place that you come into, but rather a respected place that has something to say within the local community, and in particular in working with other agencies. And I must say, one of the great experiences I've had recently was to go to an Afghani forum on a Saturday morning of the city of Greater Dandenong, along with David and Susan Ogden, the principal, and to watch 200 people and listen to them talking about issues and really workshopping them. That was really inspirational. We want to tap into that and to get that energy into what we do and how we understand. The other thing we are determined to do is to make sure that we tap into the student voice within those communities inside that school, because they will have particular views about how best the school can serve them and how the community they're part of can become a stronger part of the school and the school can become a part of their community. So that's where we are at this stage.
Thank you, Howard, for giving us a really good segue into the next little bit that I wanted people to talk about. One of the premises is that engagement with the community that we're working with positively affects settlement and learning of EAL students. So can you tell us, and I don't mind who starts, what have been some of the positive outcomes of your engagement projects, or what do you expect? What are you hoping for?
I'll go first because I'm here. I guess in terms of the schools program, I guess the most positive thing about it is when I'm sitting with a group of kids or sitting with a group of teachers or sometimes sitting with a group of parents, and I start hearing people say, "Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, really? Oh, so they're people who are escaping from danger. Oh, really? I just thought." And that happens so often, which on the one hand is fabulous, but on the other hand is extremely disturbing that there is still such a level of, such a lack, I guess, of knowledge and understanding about who people are who are seeking asylum here in Australia. So on a regular sort of basis, that I see as being a positive. There are bigger positives than that, though, because one of the things that I and the volunteers who work as part of my team, one of the things that we stress is that there are lots and lots of different ways that you can help, and certainly being involved in communities and it is really important. But we talk a lot about being a voice for people seeking asylum, because people who are in our community, people in detention centres certainly do not have a voice. People who are living in our community as people seeking asylum don't have a voice either. There are quite tight constraints about their capacity to actually engage in the broader community. We often get requests from schools to have somebody who is seeking asylum come and speak to students or speak to teachers or school communities. Every time this comes up, our legal team nearly have a conniption because people are risking their processing if they actually speak out in a public forum about their experiences as people seeking asylum. So we really ask that people become advocates for those seeking asylum. And my theory is that, education is the key to change. And the more voices we have out there talking about why people seek asylum, who they are, what we can do to support them, then the more likely we are to have policy change. We've got a little way to go yet, but there are some fabulous kids out there, fabulous kids and fabulous teachers too, who really take on board what we say and become extremely proactive. There's a little primary school in Williamstown who started off by bringing their Year 6 social justice kids into the ASRC for a visit. Those kids went back and they were the experts. They went back and they spoke to all the other Year 6s, who then started working through the school newsletter, through the wider school community, to educate their community about people seeking asylum. From there, and this is perhaps one of the biggest success stories, the principal was really on board with all of this too, which really helps, as you would all know. They went to the local parish church and said, "Hey, this is what we've learned. Can we do stuff through the church?" So this is a very active parish. And suddenly the whole church community was on board. So the parish leaders came into the ASRC, they did a fundraiser, they did a food drive, and now we've got this whole community that's out there advocating. And that's the really positive stuff. That's the really positive ongoing sort of stuff. And whilst we don't work directly with, as I said earlier, the students that you guys work closely with, hopefully as change comes, and it will come, but it will make it easier for those kids that you work with most closely to be better understood within your broader educational settings. So that's the capacity to empower people to advocate is exciting, and it's a great privilege, and that, I guess, is probably the biggest positive of the schools program at the ASRC.
Great, thank you. You've got a variety of programs, Anthony, so what are one of the two of the big benefits that you see?
Certainly that our community become more educated in cultural diversity, and our, that African family that lives down the street there, what their food tastes like, and how they're really nice, generous people, humans like the rest of us. Along with that refugees and migrants become more personalised when our students and the wider community meet through our events and meet our students, see they're actually real people, and they're very interesting, and I never knew that this and that about that particular culture, so they become much more personalised, I suppose, with the refugee community, and along with the students really build their confidence because they feel, once they start feeling more sense of belonging in the community, they're much more confident in a wide range of ways, such as approaching local businesses for work experience, and etc. there. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Mairead.
I think what I enjoy watching actually at the huddle is that there's a group of about 100 volunteers who will come to work with people, and primarily they'll be drawn to the place either because they love North Melbourne Football Club, or because they want to work with migrants and refugees, or because they've lived in the area and think they have something to give the local community. So they'll come for all those reasons, and the kids that gravitate to there, I shouldn't say kids because they're 15 to 25, the young people that gravitate there are from, could be born here, could be born elsewhere, could have arrived last week, could have, lived here all their lives, and you just see that differentiation of needs. So young people who, for example, go to an Islamic school that's in a far-flung suburb but then live in North Melbourne can be mistaken as someone who arrived here a year ago, and yet they have a whole other set of concerns and needs and things that become apparent in that space, and that gets negotiated in the space. So if you ask young people, for example, to create a playlist of what do they listen to, it will be a whole host of things from all over the world in a whole lot of languages, no matter where they're born. And that always just breaks down barriers. And I guess it's like you're talking about that kind of thing. You can then advocate through better understanding and a closer understanding of the people living right next to you. And also just because it's a space for young people, the other most important thing is that we get to hear what the concerns of young people are. And at the moment, it's mostly around employment. It's around the changing nature of work, which is obviously going to be a challenge for the whole nation, but that's where they're going. So that's driving the work that we're looking at moving into.
Great. Okay, David.
Okay. The students we deal with, some of them are recent arrivals, but not all. So I suppose there's a couple of different things. For the recent arrivals, one of the, I think, real highlights is we provide a foothold for them, somewhere to set off from. And that might be through the supply of physical things, but also the supply of relationships. Sometimes the school is the only place of relationship for them. In general terms at the school, because there are, like I said, 70, 80 different nationalities there, it's your culture being accepted for your culture and everybody respecting everybody else's culture and respecting difference. One of my stepsons just finished year 12 there last year. He only came in year 11 and 12. And he was an unusual character, and at his former school he had some issues with other students and got a bit of a hard time. And when he arrived, students started talking to him and he said, "Oh, look, I'm a bit different, and that's why I got a hard time at other schools." And the students who were talking to him just said, "Here, everybody's different, so it doesn't really make any difference." So I think that's the thing that stands out for me.
Okay, Thanks,
I'll just make a couple of comments. First of all, actually, if it's okay, I wanted to pick up on something that Misty said when she was talking about her interview with discussion with Laurie Ferguson, and she talked about anecdotes. Can I say to you that, and even just listening to what people have said already, one of the most powerful things that folk like yourself have is to understand 3 letters that I was taught many, many years ago when I had to do some training to do with media, to do with the VCE. And the letters are MBE. And they don't stand for Member of the British Empire. They stand for main point, because, and example. And when you want to advocate, as you ought, for the areas of the curriculum and the young people who you advocate for, it's incredibly powerful. One of the most powerful words in the English language is the word because. So when you actually make a point and you use the word because, and then you actually give examples of what you mean, concrete examples, it helps to nullify people who want to trivialise what you have to say, and also those who want to oppose what you have to say or to question the integrity of it. I just pass that on for what it's worth. It's certainly helped me a lot in the stuff I've done. I wanted to also just say one of the things we want to explore in this project is the relationship that all of us have in our schools between results, students, parents and pressure. And certainly in the communities that you serve, that will be very present. One of the things we want to help the various communities to understand is that a student is, as you know, more than an ATAR score. And one of the things which still nauseates me is the young people in our schools inside your communities and other communities who often apply for a course because of the ATAR that they got rather than what they want to do for what they want to do. And one of the things we want to do is to work specifically with students and with particular communities to understand the notion of credit. Because too many of our families think that there is only one way forward. You have to go to a university, and they don't understand, because we haven't told them, that there are a multitude of ways to get on, and one of them is to do a diploma. And so if you take places like out in Lilydale, there is a new TAFE Institute been reopened there by the current government at Lilydale. Box Hill has opened it. A person can go there, do a diploma, get a guaranteed entry into a second year at Deakin University in a range of courses without having to bother so much about their ATAR. Now you might say, oh, that's a bit off the point from what we're talking about here, but in actual fact it's not. Because the pressures that a lot of the young people who we are trying to support and underpin are really under the pump from the almost, can I put it, almost colonial view of what success is that is naturally carried by many of their parents and by many of the communities they live within. And if we can chip away at that and broaden the dialogue and understanding, I think we will have done a fair bit to lessen pressure, to open up other opportunities, and to also help parents feel more confident about the range of things that their young people might do. So I just share that with you.
Fantastic. Now,
press the wrong button. Go.
Okay. Lastly, I'm just going to ask each of you to maybe identify one issue that you had when you were setting up the programs, or one thing that proved to be a challenge for you, and just tell us briefly sort of how you dealt with that, and maybe some tips for young players.
Okay. I guess in establishing the program, I've been at the ASRC for 5 years now. The program was in its infancy when I arrived. It's now a very large program. Last year, I think we did something like 175 presentations across about 120 different schools, which was pretty exciting, I have to say. But the biggest challenge within the program is actually having the capacity to meet all the requests. We get requests from every state and territory to provide a speaker, and we're a not-for-profit organisation, so there's no hopping on planes and flying off to Darwin to do a presentation about people seeking asylum. In terms of attempting to meet that challenge, fingers crossed, by the end of this year we'll have a bank of online resources which we can provide to teachers and schools in areas that we can't get to. But again, that comes back to capacity. Just the other quick challenge that I'll mention, it's an interesting one, and as a teacher, it distresses me a bit when I go and speak to groups in schools, and I sometimes see teachers sitting at the back of the group doing correction or some other sort of activity when I or one of my volunteers is presenting what we think are quite engaging and interesting and important presentations. And as somebody who worked in and has worked in education for a long time, that sort of modelling, I guess, distresses me and disturbs me, and I'm sort of developing a range of little strategies and comments to try and engage that teacher or teachers in the discussion or the presentation. Two quite different challenges, I guess, and neither of them have I actually successfully overcome as yet, but still working on it.
Okay, Anthony.
One issue is funding for programs and excursions and camps and etc. like that. For example, with our Multicultural Day that we run annually, which would be how are we going to be able to purchase all these food ingredients to be cooked at school, etc. So we need to get a bit creative at our school and look at what grants are on offer for social inclusion for multicultural students. So Victorian Multicultural Commission the past few years have been very much appreciated by my school with applications that I've written there and received. And also last year had a student group, leadership group, compose a grant application for Student Youth Week organisation, which was successful there. So we're able to complete some more inclusion activities and purchase things like picnic rugs for our speed friendship activity that we completed, and along with food ingredients and all sorts of other things there for those inclusive activities. So that's a way we've been able to overcome it through grant applications and just getting a bit creative, such as if we know we have to pass on costs for CRT. If you're away, taking students away for a day, maybe, and that cost needs to be passed on to the students too. So then maybe swap a class with another colleague that will take your class on that day you're away. So then you avoid passing that $75 charge onto the students and some little things like that, I suppose. Yeah. Thanks.
Money's always a problem. Mairead.
Just thinking, I mean, running a not-for-profit organisation is a huge feat in itself. So there's applications and boards and grants and evaluation, all those things. So I think in terms of most of you probably being teachers and in schools already and thinking about how can schools engage with community, it's really worth going and seeing what's out in community already, because they're putting a lot of work in to be there. So what I think is great about the huddle is that the young people that come because they want to be there. But we also need a connection with the school, and it shouldn't be too close because that might make them run away, if you know what I mean. Like, they're there because they want to be there with you, because we don't know their results, their NAPLAN, their anything. We just accept, are you here and you want to learn? So we want to keep that relationship, but at the same time, if they say, oh, I think I want to be a doctor or something, you sort of think, gee, I wish I could talk to the careers teacher and see whether they've already done a pathway plan or what their results are like or whatever. So I would just encourage you to try and find a pathway to working with the existing community organisations that are out there that are productive and look after help everybody to get to the same end where you're helping the people that you're working with.
Great.
What was the question again? Challenge other
Just choose one or two, David.
One or two. I'm trying to. One of the things, I think we're working in a team of people, and I'm in a couple of projects at the school at the present time, and some of the other people within the team want to do things straight away, and we're saying, just hold on. And I think that's a really difficult thing. That you take the time to think about what you're doing, and take the time to put it into place so that you actually embed it and it doesn't just become a program that is done and when it's finished it's sort of gone. It needs to be long term and it needs to be just part of the school culture. I suppose I've got a bit of a benefit because I sleep with the principal because I'm married to her. It's all right. So we sort of get support in that and there are resources if we need those. Sorry, you can stop laughing now. The other thing is, and always, is that you contextualise what you're doing because you can hear about a great program and you take the program and you take it back to your school and you do the program and it doesn't work because the people in your school aren't the people in our school or the school that it came from or the people it was tried on. So you need to make sure that you fit it to your context before you go racing off trying to do something.
We're glad we've clarified many things here today. Very, very, very happy for you, David. I think the key thing... Good God, that's really broken me up, that has. I think actually you are all interested in achieving something for young people. You're actually essentially interested, as we all are here, in reform of some way, shape or form. People get a little bit carried away with the notion of reform. I've been around a fair bit. I'm 69 this year. I feel some of you are old enough if I say I'm like a curriculum version of Eric Pierce. Two of you will laugh and you'll remember that vaguely.
Maybe there's a lady over here who's one.
But my point is that patience is what reform is about. Patience in the context of competing priorities within any institution that you're in and understanding that it is an incremental notion that you're on about. And that's why I made my comment before about the MBE and you build up your case slowly but steadily. And we will have to do that. David's quite correct. There are a couple of people at Dandenong High who would kind of go for broke. Well, you know, I'd love to know how many things that we've heard that have been stated in this auditorium as the Bastow Institute of great speakers and great thinkers, etc., with marvellous ideas that have been floated forward and been pushed furiously and then come to very little. Sustainable change is what is required, and that requires patience and incrementalism and an understanding of discipline inside those who wish to reform. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you all. It's been inspirational listening to what all of you are doing in your varied situations, and I'm sure that there's a lot of people here who would love to ask some questions. So I am going to open it up to the floor. If you would like to ask a question, if you push the little button near your microphone, if a red light comes onto your microphone, that means you're active and you can ask your question. If you're in the queue, you'll get a flashing green light, and then it will change to red when it's your turn. So have a think. If you do have a question, just push your button and hopefully we'll be able to see you from down here and someone from the panel will be able to answer. So.
Mine's more of a comment, I think. I feel, David, you'd taken pillow talk to a new level.
You've obviously done a good job of explaining yourselves. Thank you. There's someone up here.
It's a bit of a comment, but maybe a question. We're from the TAFE sector, and what you're talking about, community engagement, is also really important with the parents of the students that most of you teach as well, because they're often socially disengaged from the wider community, depending on their gender. Sometimes they're very isolated within the four walls of their home, and coming to English classes and meeting other people and meeting their teachers is their only connection to the Australian society and community. And it's a big challenge for us as well to make those connections with community outside the school, bringing in our case, the Geelong community, into the TAFE to meet some of these people and to have them connect to see that there are options for them outside of their cultural group and outside of their class. Does anyone have any ideas as well? Maybe trying to connect parents and their learning environments with the learning environments of their children.
Go for it, David.
I'd just make the comment that I think I understand that as a challenge. You may be interested to know that one of the TAFE institutes, Melbourne Polytechnic, that I'm doing a little bit of work with at the moment, they're trying to understand the diversity that they serve and trying to figure out whether they can almost develop particular relationships with key community leaders, and specifically on the issue of credit. I honestly believe that there's a stack of people out there who have no idea about the credits that they can get and the pathways they can gain access to if they have a broader understanding of what education post-school can be on about. So I suppose maybe some contact with Francis Coppolillo, who's the Deputy CEO at Melbourne Polytechnic, might be handy. Okay.
Anyone else? Great. Oh, sorry, this lady here.
Sorry,
hang on. April, you're in the queue. There's a lady behind you with a red button, so her microphone will be active. I know, but red means go in this context.
Red for on air.
Off you go.
I'd love to hear just a little bit more about Dandenong. I think if I understood you correctly, you said taking it steadily and making a plan and doing things. But having been a person who was encouraged by my boss to go out in the community, and it changed my whole life and ended up with a career change, and that was a very exciting thing. Can you give us an example of something that you think is going to happen or is starting to happen, just to make it a little bit more concrete?
Nothing's starting to happen, because, and I brought the document here, really what we've done is come up with a definition or a purpose for the group. So the purpose of the group is to develop mutually beneficial relationships and establish processes to connect with the diversity of groups within the scope of wider Dandenong High School community. And there's a bit more, but that really is the nux of what we're trying to do. And so I suppose what we're trying to do is make the school a reference point within the community. So it's more than just doing things. We're already doing lots of things. We're already in the community. We already use groups. We're connected with Headspace, with ELMS, with Foundation House, with Asylum Seeker Resource Centre, with a whole range of agencies. And then there are different levels of that. We have a program within the school for young people who are recent arrivals. So there's a transition program for students who are between 16 and 18 that is called Connect, that is about taking them in, preparing them for Year 10 or moving into Year 11, and they can do that throughout the year. So there's a whole range of stuff that actually happens. So this is a different project. This project is about us being in the community and being recognised in the community and being that point of reference for education and broader issues within the community. And I think that's why we're taking a bit of time and why we're trying to connect to particular groups. I don't know whether you know, when the group that Howard talked about that we went and met on a Saturday morning, and we, Susan and I sat up the front, we talked about education and what was necessary for education. The Afghani community is made up of something like 30 different groups that have distinctly different languages, distinctly different understandings. So trying to go out and do something with the Afghani community isn't going to work. So that's why we're taking the time. We've actually made contact with a man who works within that community and is a leader across some of those communities. And we're trying to engage with him so that when we do it right. So it will be about providing information to parents. It will be providing an entryway for parents back into the school, and simple things. We talked about doing a film or releasing things in other languages, in their languages. And his advice was, don't bother, because a lot of the people you're dealing with are illiterate in their own language, so they won't be able to read it anyway. And so the best way to do that is to do simple English with diagrams, or do somebody filmed answering questions in really straightforward, simple English. And that's why we're taking our time, because we want to get it right rather than do it fast.
Thank you.
Can I just add to that? The other practical thing, issues to do with attendance and attitudes of that. That's one thing we've talked to this gentleman about, and we want to work on that, particularly helping people to understand the relationship between results and attendance, because that certainly is an issue. Another group we have come across is an Afghani Professional Leaders Association, and we're hoping we can, through working with this guy that David referred to, connecting with them and having them a little bit more involved in kind of running some sessions, or at some stage running some sessions with us outside in the community, not at the school. And so similarly with the Islander community, we would hope that through some contacts we've got, that there would be some sessions in some of those churches before the end of this year where we're actually out talking about and discussing educational issues with them, rather than the old traditional way that we do it. You know, I mean, I remember the classic. It was actually, I remember Joan Kerner helped run a master's degree at Melbourne Union School of Leadership, and she came to speak to it, and one principal said to her on this issue, he stood up and he said, I don't know. He said, I've tried everything and they don't come. And she, in her beautiful manner, she was a marvellous woman. She looked at him, she knew the school he was from, and she said to him, I bet you haven't asked the women. And he certainly hadn't. But the point that she was making was, if you're going to get anywhere in this, it's slow, steady work, but we're quite clear about some of the things we would want to see happen before the end of the year.
Great, thank you. Now, if you wouldn't mind turning off your microphone, and then that way, yes, perfect. Okay, thanks, April.
Oh, no, I think the questions have been answered. I was actually responding to the woman who works in the TAFE sector asking, and I was going to say exactly what you've just said. You know, would you be able to offer sessions to hubs, community hubs, where people do meet? I mean, often, and if we're tapping into women, it's often English language classes. So, for example, like I think about that in my own school setting, there's frequently that statement, oh, but they just don't turn up. And it's not just EAL, I have to say, families. But there's a pace, like English language classes being held on I think it's a Thursday night. And that'd be a great place to be targeting members of the community and giving them that kind of information about your expectations for your child and pathways and things like that. So, yeah, I'm just wondering if you could identify those. That might help you.
Great. Look, thank you, everybody. Thank you very much to our 5 panellists. It's been inspiring to listen to the way that you are celebrating and educating about and personalising diversity through involvement and experience with your communities, and finding creative solutions and talking to the right people, and it's given us all some food for thought. I'm just going to hark back to something David said at the very beginning, where he said that the idea is to be making the most of our cultural collateral, and I think that's something that we can all take with us. So thank you very, very much.
And thank you very much, Michelle, for running that panel so ably. Michelle's got a small gift just to give to Jenny, Anthony, Mairead, David and Howard. Just a small thanks for your efforts and contributions to the day. I would like to just draw the day to a close. Thank you all for your presence and participation. I hope today has inspired in each and every one of you the resolve to speak out for and to support EAL learners, their rights and opportunities, and also to progress the incredibly positive contributions newcomers to Australia make to further enhance our ideal of a just and a fair society. I think so very often we are celebrated as a wonderful multicultural nation, but unfortunately there's contrary discourse and opinions are too very often raised and unfortunately grasp the power of the media because of their controversiality. And so it's incumbent upon us all to make sure that the right voices are heard. And of course, join VicTESOL. At the end of the day, there's going to be an afternoon tea just up in the Plato area, just at the top of the stairs there. A final opportunity to network, to share your experiences of the day. And in addition to that, there are some evaluation forms in front of each and every chair there. Now, I really encourage you to complete those. We are funded by the Department of Education, VicTESOL I mean, to develop and provide a professional learning program for EAL teachers and EAL students through our associations with VATE and their many programs. But it's so critical that you give us information and feedback about what you want from the association in terms of professional learning. We all meet regularly and try and decide what might be pertinent or relevant, but we rely on you to provide and give us that direction so as the professional learning opportunities are meaningful and appropriate. So please complete those. And finally, on behalf of the VicTESOL committee, I'd particularly like to thank two key people today, and that's Catherine. Catherine's our professional learning coach or administrator, and she's new to us this year, and she's been able to put together this conference, this symposium today, so very ably communicated with all the people that have presented. So Catherine, thank you so much for all your work. And Jack, our association officer, who's worked closely with Catherine to make sure that this day has been so successful. So thank you very much, Jack. So that's all. Once again, thank you for coming, and please stay around and have a cup of tea or coffee, and I believe there's some delicious cakes up there too to sustain you. Thank you.